Great. When I was thinking about CSR and the CSR awards, I think it's a really, really interesting and fascinating area. I had a gentleman the other day tell me and inform me quite strongly that CSR is dead, and I sort of said, well, I hope not, because that means I'm out of a job, basically. But there is a lot of dynamic and different schools of thought in CSR at the minute, and I think for me, it's not so much about why CSR is happening, but how it's happening, and how we're seeing businesses interpret CSR in terms of risk, reputation, and most importantly, purpose.
Can I just ask if everyone is actually clear what CSR is, just to make sure everyone needs a quick explanation?
I could take all day, but yeah. Does anyone know corporate social responsibility? I'm sure many of you are already very well involved in corporate responsibility within your own firms and companies. Firstly, I'd like to just explain a little bit about CAF and then go on to talk about corporate social responsibility and what it means and how it's evolving, and then talk about how we're seeing employees get more and more involved in it. As mentioned, please do ask questions, please interrupt. It always makes it a bit more interesting. Firstly, for those of you who don't know the Charities Aid Foundation, I believe many of you do through the private client side or the bank side, but we're a 90-year-old organisation, charity, we're the 10th largest foundation in Europe, and our mission is to motivate a society to give ever more effectively, ultimately. And what we've been doing for the last 90 years is developing services and products to that end, to that aim. And what that means is ultimately, currently we basically are stewards that oversee about £500 million worth of funds going into the charity sector each year. On the corporate side, we work with about 70% of the FTSE 100. And we oversee about £115 million worth of corporate and employee giving. But alongside that, we are really committed to working with businesses to help them develop more responsible business practices. And a term we're starting to use much more is integrated social purpose. So thinking about how businesses can better align their aim and purpose with that of society, and how together people can come together to really try and solve some of the intractable issues that we're facing today in the world. I'm sure you're aware of many, but one of them is obviously food scarcity and water scarcity. And in addition to that, we have CAF Bank, and we also have a social impact investment arm, CAF Ventures as well. And what makes CAF unique is that we work on social enterprise principles, so we are entirely self-funded and therefore truly independent. And any surplus that we make from our operational side of the business, we then reinvest in terms of policy development and supporting the charity sector. So when I was thinking about CSR today, I actually thought of back to two events I had the opportunity to go to last week. One was initiated between ourselves at CAF and the CBI, and was based on the question, can business build a better society? I put that question to the floor at the minute. Do people believe business can build a better society? Some nods, a lot of silence. And how many of you think the public believe that business makes a positive contribution to society? Well, maybe a bit more cynical than the public themselves. Around 50% of the public believe that business makes a positive contribution to society. Only 50% do, ultimately, which in itself is a sobering thought, considering the importance that business plays in the economy and providing prosperity to this country. In that debate, we have the likes of Barclays, CBI themselves, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Business Institute of Ethics, debating this issue and coming to understand what were the important aspects. And one of them that came up very, very strongly was corporate citizenship and corporate culture, and the roles that employees take, and the role of personal responsibility, and the role of responsible leadership in helping to make businesses more responsible, and to make businesses think about the longer term, a more strategic sort of view of what their role is in society and how they're going to support the world around them. The other one was at CAF Business School, which ran a symposium on responsible responsible leadership. And they asked really interesting questions such as, how do organisations encourage personal responsibility? And are there tensions between personal drivers for responsible leadership and professional and industry concerns? So how can people behave ethically in industries that are often seen as unethical? And I don't know if people have views around that, considering some of the sectors that are represented here today. But it's all about how do we start to change the perception of those sectors, because often actually they do a lot of good as well as some bad.
So can I ask a question? What would personal responsibility manifest as in your office, for instance?
Personal responsibility in the office can manifest itself So I think one of the really interesting things that came out of the financial crisis was what risk and reputation were around, and actually that previously people always thought risk was a compliance issue and reputation was a corporate affairs issue. But what the financial crisis and other scandals have done is demonstrate that risk and reputation sit with every one of your employees, because any one of your employees can take an action which can fundamentally damage your firm or damage your organisation if it's the wrong action. And I think, therefore, it stopped being about policy and procedure and started to be a real discussion about behaviour change. And the question is, why do people come to work and leave their ethics and values on the door as they walk in, and behave differently to how they might behave in real life? And what are the pressures that they're being put under to make the wrong choices?
It could go the other way, couldn't it? They could be a criminal employee and behave better in the office.
Yeah, that's true.
Just checking in there, you know.
That's a positive spin on it. But I think what we're seeing in terms of responsible leadership is about people being able to take more ownership, more accountability, feel more empowered. I think a lot of what was touched on earlier, this idea of being supported also by your senior leadership to make the right decisions and to feel that actually that those decisions will be endorsed. And what we're seeing, why CSR is so important, is because it allows employees to actually action or have agency in terms of the values that they think are important to them and practice them and use them. Maybe not directly in the workplace, but use them elsewhere and then bring them back into the office. So it's really something we're seeing more and more of. And like, coming back to what we heard at CAF, there were sort of academics like Professor Jaime Ibarra, who does a lot of work on authenticity, but also about playfulness and leadership and how you basically can develop the right type of leadership. But also people like Melanie Richards, who's the Vice Chairman for KPMG, and she spent a lot of time talking to us about purpose and the importance of purpose and how KPMG is looking to develop purpose as part of their responsible leadership approach. They recently decided to shut down all their offices for one day and bring all their staff together in the O2 to talk about purpose and the importance of purpose. Now, if you imagine just the billing hours that got lost for that one activity, it's quite incredible. It shows a genuine commitment by the leadership, because ultimately, as partners, that all came out from it. So, really, really interesting. So I think for us, one of the things I wanted to say around it was that businesses are increasingly using CSR as a tool to help them demonstrate their purpose and ethics. I think that's where we're seeing it most strongly and most effectively translated.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think there's short-term and long-term purpose? Because at the moment there's a Syrian refugee crisis, isn't there? So you can have a long-term purpose as a business, but then short-term the employees might be, for instance, more interested in a short-term donations or activity, might look like things could change.
I think there's things about what people do to sort of external activity they take to support helping society, like you have a disaster response, you have the refugee crisis, and then there are sort of systemic changes that business has to make to be more ethical. So things like working conditions, for that mean, the living London wage or the living wage is another area. We're talking about, one of the things we're talking about, the time it takes for businesses to pay their bills, exactly the impact it can have on smaller suppliers. So there's definitely a view of actually encouraging and empowering your employees to feel that they can take positive action, but then there is still the bigger question of the systemic changes that need to happen in business. That the whole, it's not being, somebody termed it as not being just a responsible business, is business behaving responsibly in everything it does, and I think there's a slight nuance there.
We've done some stuff for a while at Citywealth, which we did some stuff on gender equality, which is, we realised we could make a massive change. We did some stuff at the London School of Economics, and they said if we checked all of the suppliers who are working with Citywealth, including the venue today, for instance, and said, well, what are your gender policies? What are your bargaining hour policies, for employees? That we could make a massive, even as a smallish business, we could make a massive change by working with 20 or 30 suppliers each year, and actually just making sure we had that information before we progressed with them.
Yeah, it does. And KPMG was saying, as part of their example, they're saying, because they obviously support the living wage and they were some of the earliest proponents of it, that obviously matters not just for their direct workers, but all for all their supply chains, such as their cleaning staff, their receptions and things. The result of introducing it, they found that they have lower attrition, they have higher morale amongst their staff, they have more permanency among their staff, which means they get a better quality of service, basically, they get a lot more loyalty, and just a sense of pride across the organisation. So there's lots of other benefits that come about. But often people are quite cynical about these things. It takes a few sort of pioneers to do it, demonstrate it, show the benefits before everybody else gets behind it.